In a bustling mall on the outskirts of a sprawling city, the air was thick with the hum of shoppers, the clinking of coins, and the faint scent of fried food from the food court. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where families, teenagers, and retirees all converged under one roof, chasing deals or simply escaping the monotony of the day. Among them was Devante, a wiry man in his late 30s, his face etched with the kind of exhaustion that comes from working 2 jobs and still barely making ends meet. His 7-year-old daughter, Emma, clung to his hand, her eyes wide with wonder at the glittering displays of toys and clothes they could only dream of affording. Devante wasn't at the mall to shop. He was there because Emma had begged him to take her to see the giant Christmas tree in the atrium, its lights twinkling like stars. He'd promised her a small treat, a $2 ice cream cone from the food court, if he could scrape together enough change from his beat-up wallet. But as they stood in line at the ice cream stand, Devante's heart sank. His card was declined, and the crumpled bills in his pocket came up short. The cashier, a young woman with a bored expression, tapped her fingers impatiently. Emma's hopeful smile began to fade, and Devante felt the familiar sting of failure. Behind them, a small crowd had gathered, and a mall security guard, a burly man named Carl with a badge pinned to his chest, approached. Carl had been watching Devante for a while, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the man's worn jacket and scuffed shoes. To Carl, Devante looked like trouble, someone who didn't belong in the polished world of the mall. "Sir, you're holding up the line," Carl said gruffly, stepping closer. "If you can't pay, you need to move." Devante's voice was calm but strained. "I'm trying, man. Just give me a second." He rifled through his pockets again, hoping to find a stray dollar, but Carl wasn't in the mood for patience. The guard's hand rested on his radio, his posture aggressive, as if Devante were a threat rather than a father trying to buy his kid an ice cream. The situation escalated quickly. Carl's voice grew louder, drawing more eyes. "You're causing a scene. Step aside, or I'll have to escort you out." Emma's grip on her father's hand tightened, her eyes darting between the guard and the crowd. Devante's jaw clenched, not out of anger but out of the crushing weight of humiliation. He wasn't just a man who couldn't afford a $2 cone, in that moment, he was a spectacle, a failure in front of his daughter and strangers. Unbeknownst to them, someone else was watching. Across the food court, leaning against a pillar, was Jason. The action star was in town for a film shoot, blending into the crowd in a plain black cap and sunglasses. He wasn't one for malls, but he'd stopped in to grab a coffee before heading back to his hotel. His sharp eyes caught the commotion, and something about the scene. The father's quiet dignity, the little girl's trembling lip, the guard's unnecessary aggression, stirred him. Jason set his coffee down and strode over, his presence commanding without effort. The crowd parted instinctively as he approached, his boots clicking on the tiled floor. "What's the problem here?" he asked, his voice low but carrying the kind of authority that made Carl hesitate. The guard puffed out his chest, undeterred by the stranger's intensity. "This guy's causing trouble. Can't pay, won't move." Jason's gaze flicked to Devante, then to Emma, whose eyes were now brimming with tears. He saw the truth in an instant, a father trying to give his kid a moment of joy, cornered by a power-hungry guard. "Doesn't look like trouble to me," Jason said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "Looks like a man trying to buy his daughter an ice cream." Carl scoffed, crossing his arms. "If he can't pay, he's gotta go. Rules are rules." Jason's lips twitched, not quite a smile. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $20 bill, and slid it across the counter to the cashier. "Here. That covers the ice cream. And get her whatever else she wants." He glanced at Emma, softening for a moment. "What's your favorite flavor, kid?" Emma, stunned, mumbled, "Chocolate." The cashier, now wide-eyed, quickly scooped a generous cone and handed it to her. The crowd murmured, some pulling out their phones to record the scene. But Carl wasn't done. His pride stung, he stepped closer to Jason, his voice rising. You think you can just walk in and play hero? This ain't your business. Jason turned to face him, his posture relaxed but his eyes locked on Carl like a predator sizing up prey. Mate, you're the one making this a problem. You're harassing a man for no reason. Back off. The tension crackled. Carl, emboldened by his badge, took a step forward, his hand hovering near his baton. The crowd held its breath. Devontae, sensing danger, pulled Emma behind him, his voice quiet but firm. We don't want trouble. We'll leave. But Jason held up a hand, signaling Devontae to stay. You're not going anywhere. You and your girl deserve to be here as much as anyone. Then, to Carl, he said, you want to push this, let's see how it goes. What happened next was a blur. Carl, misjudging the situation, lunged forward, grabbing Jason's arm. In a fluid motion, Jason twisted free, using Carl's momentum to spin him around and pin him against the counter with just enough force to make his point. It wasn't the choreographed chaos of a movie fight, it was precise, controlled, and over in seconds. Carl's face reddened, more from embarrassment than pain, as Jason leaned in and whispered, "Walk away. Now." The guard stumbled back, muttering under his breath, and retreated to the edge of the food court, his ego bruised but his body intact. The crowd erupted in cheers, some clapping, others filming. Emma, clutching her ice cream, stared at Jason like he was a superhero. Devontae, still processing what had happened, extended a trembling hand. Man, I don't know how to thank you. Jason shook his hand, his grip firm but warm. You don't have to. Just take care of your girl. He reached into his wallet again, pulling out a few more bills, enough to cover a meal, maybe a toy from the store nearby. Get her something nice. She deserves it. Devontae's eyes glistened, not just from gratitude but from the rare feeling of being seen, not as a struggling father or a target of suspicion, but as a man. Why'd you do this? He asked quietly. Jason shrugged, his tough exterior softening just enough to show the man beneath. I've been where you are. Not easy, is it? Nobody should make it harder than it has to be. As Jason walked away, disappearing into the crowd, Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, was that a movie star? Devontae chuckled, wiping his eyes. Yeah, baby. But he's more than that. The story spread like wildfire. Shoppers posted videos online, and by evening, the clip of Jason shutting down the overzealous guard was trending. But for Devontae and Emma, the real impact wasn't the viral fame, it was the moment of kindness that reminded them they weren't alone. For Jason, it was just another day, a small act in a life full of action, but one that carried the weight of compassion. And somewhere in the mall, Carl sat in the security office, replaying the encounter in his mind, wondering how a simple day on the job had turned into a lesson he'd never forget.